Hello and welcome to Arise News. It's Tuesday the 21st of February. I'm John Fashanu in Nigeria's capital Abuja, and this is Arise News Now. Our top story this hour, making gains in Mosul. Security forces have pushed into the south of the city in the battle against terror. Taking power in Somalia as the country prepares for the inauguration. The new president faces big challenges. And cleaning up the Niger Delta in more ways than one, as it's revealed up to $100 billion has been lost over 10 years. We begin today in Iraq, where government forces have successfully pushed into southern Mossad territory, held by the so-called Islamic State. This is the third day of a new offensive to rid the city of terror group. Iraqi forces, backed by jets and helicopters, seized an important strategic point position yesterday near Mosul airport. IS fighters were using the location to battle back against the offensive. The terror group have also planted explosive devices along the route. The United States is backing the assault on Mosul, but officials have been forced to deny they plan to seize oil after Trump declared the US should have kept it following the invasion in 2003. Staying on the theme of corruption is helping the so-called Islamic State thrive. The group won't be defeated until the issue has been dealt with. That's the claim from a new report. Transparency International has accused several Western governments, including the UK and the US, of ignoring the corruption which is helping fuel terror in the Middle East. The big study, the big spin, says IS has ignored its own dishonest activities in taking advantage of corruption to recruit new members while presenting itself as the solution to the problem plaguing the region. In the United States, Lieutenant General McMaster has been named as the new National Security Advisor. His appointment comes after Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was fired after just 3 weeks and 3 days in the job. McMaster served in Iraq, Afghanistan, where he worked on a government anti-corrupt drive. President Trump's first choice, retired Vice Admiral Robert Harwood, turned down the role, citing personal reasons. In Somalia, newly elected President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed is getting ready for his inauguration, which takes place tomorrow. Mohamed has his work cut out. He has inherited a government which has little control over the country because of the terror group Al-Shabaab. As a result, Somalia is heavily propped up by the international community. On a brighter note, Mohammed is better known by his nickname, which actually translated means cheese. Russian President Vladimir Putin says he was grieved to learn of the death of one of his country's veteran diplomats. Vitaly Chukun, who was Russia's ambassador to the United Nations, would have celebrated his 65th birthday today. Sadly, he died suddenly while at work in the UN. Arise News New York correspondent Frank Eke reports.
The passing of Russian UN Ambassador Vitaly Churkin stunned the diplomatic corps here at the United Nations headquarters in New York.
A deeply committed diplomat to his country and one of the finest people we have known. And I'd like to mark this moment here today with a moment of silence in memory of his service. Please stand.
The President of the United Nations General Assembly, Peter Thompson, said he was greatly saddened at the news of the passing of dear friend Ambassador Vitaly Churkin. The Russian Federation and the United Nations have lost a true son and a great international intellect. Russian Ambassador Vitaly Churkin was admired by his colleagues, who found him to be a formidable adversary, but also a man they could engage with personally. As for the diplomatic press corps here, we found him to be sometimes abrasive, difficult, but always an interesting interview. Newly minted U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley wrote in a statement, "In my short time at the United Nations, Ambassador Vitaly Churkin showed himself to be a gracious colleague. We did not always see things the same way, but he unquestionably advocated his country's positions with great skill. We send our prayers and heartfelt condolences to lift up his family and to the Russian people." British Ambassador Matthew Rycroft said on Twitter that he was absolutely devastated to hear that my friend and colleague Vitaly Churkin has died, a diplomatic giant and wonderful character. France's ambassador to the UN, Francois Delettre, called Churkin one of the most talented diplomats I had ever met. And then there was this comment from former U.S. UN Ambassador Samantha Power, who described Churkin as a diplomatic maestro and deeply caring man who did all he could to bridge U.S.-Russia differences. Churkin hit the diplomatic spotlight as the Soviet Union's foreign ministry spokesman in 1990. He went on to serve as deputy Russian foreign minister, ambassador to Belgium, Canada, and then was posted to the United Nations in 2006. Vitaly Churkin died a day short of his 65th birthday. Frankie Ciardo, Arise News, the United Nations.
Now, up to $100 billion has been lost over 10 years to attacks on the oil and gas infrastructure by the Niger Delta militancy. From January to October in 2016 alone, the industry lost over $7 billion to militancy. Oil production was slashed from 2.2 million barrels per day to 1 million barrel per day last year. These figures cover the entire industry, including the international oil companies, independent producers, as well as the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. Well, I'm joined now by Ledun Mitee, who is the Executive Secretary for Nigeria Extradict Industries Transparency Initiative. The organization audits the financial position of the NNPC and the big cleanup exercise in Niger Delta. Good morning, Ledun.
Good morning.
Now, before we start,
just a point.
Did I say something wrong there?
I'm not the Executive Secretary of NITE. I used to be the chairman of NITE.
You used to be. Okay, excuse me, I apologize. Nevertheless, it is your, shall we say, it's under your control, you're there.
I'm no longer with NITE, but I used to be there.
Okay, well, Ledun, we are hearing of not millions, we're hearing of billions of dollars going missing because of the militancy. How true is this, and does it really affect the industry?
Well, clearly, when you hear of loss of any money, it clearly will affect the industry.
Billions?
I mean, that's not only the industry, but even the economy of the country. And I think that at present, there are some good signs that some of those issues are receding, if I may say so. But this is the sustainability of that sort of situation that calls to question, because it can flash off in any direction at any point.
Do you think that there's any way that any of those billions of dollars will be able to be recovered in terms of having peace so people can work?
Well, clearly, it depends on what steps are being taken. In my view, it seems to me that at some stage, we must be able to look at the whole value chain. For instance, how much are we spending on the military in the area? How much what is the opportunity cost of what is going on? And in terms of the issues, the vice president, acting president has been going on some movement in the area. I hope that some dialogue situation will take place so that the local communities can partner with the government and then isolate those who feel that they want to threaten the industry. What appears to have happened in the past is that government has not clearly come out to deal with the issues that call the grievances in the Niger Delta. And that appears to be what seems to be the main challenge.
Ledun, I've got to ask you, a 20-point plan has been drawn up. How effective has it really been? I mean, obviously it's to institute peace in the region, which is critical.
Well, one of the ways in which problems become difficult to address is when those who are involved in it are not taken in the conceptualization of what plans are being taken. The leaders of the Niger Delta, under the group called PANDEF, that I'm the secretary of, had presented a 16-point conversation point with the federal government to have a conversation. What we see is that the government itself came up with a 40-point and later a 20-point agenda, which did not even seem as if maybe they took into consideration even the points that the people are asking for. So as our people say, sometimes you scratch someone where it's not itching. So it seems to me that what is required is a more holistic conversation that respects the views of the people on the ground, their environment, and their means of livelihood. And that is the sort of conversation that will solve the problem, not for government to arrogate to themselves that they have an answer to the problem without even input from the people.
Well, the cleanup operation obviously is going to take an awful lot of money. Do you think that enough money has been dedicated for the cleanup operation? Because that is critical, isn't it?
Well, my view has always been that what happens in our country, regrettably, is throwing money at every problem and therefore creates an industry by itself. It's not actually money per se, but what do we do with the money? And how do we ensure that the money does what it's supposed to do? Since June last year, there was a ceremony called a flag off of the cleanup. Just last week, we also saw another show called foundation laying ceremony, which was just planting of trees. But ultimately, people on the ground have not seen any practical steps towards the cleanup. So it's not so much about the money, but it's about what is being done. The United Nations Environmental Program recommended, one of the things it says is that the people are drinking water that is about 1,000 times above the limits, contaminated to about 1,000 times above the limits acceptable for drinking. And that the first steps should be to provide alternative drinking water to the people. We've not seen anything like that, but we've seen flag-off ceremony without any direct action on the ground. And this is why I feel that it's not so much of throwing money into a situation, because it now creates an industry by itself. Every person wants to take a piece of the action without necessarily looking at what it does ultimately, especially in a matter like this, that the livelihoods of people have been brought into severe challenge.
Well, Ledun Mitee, I think we still got quite a way to go. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Well, over to UK now, where this week a knife-edge by-election is being held in the biggest Brexit backing city. It's make or break for UKIP, and Labour with both parties struggling to find their roles as Britain quits the European Union. Arise has this special report.